wagon stealing, woo, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun. Yeah! Kurt Angle, yeah! Why, Triple H, you son of a tell me why! And Tony Khan, this is also on you!
I am going to ruin wrestling.
Just get over it!
What is up? What is up? What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It is yours truly, Flamin' Ricky Gervais, right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. It is July 13th, 2025. We are coming off of the heels of All In Texas, and it was a crazy night of professional wrestling. We saw a lot of things go down at All In Texas. Of course, the main thing that we are going to be talking about is Hangman Page versus Jon Moxley for the AEW World Championship. And let's just say, if you watched Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns 2, you knew what to expect coming into Hangman Page versus Jon Moxley in the Texas Death Match at All In Texas. Of course, if you really want to say or look at Hangman Page versus Jon Moxley in a nutshell, it was WrestleMania 40 on steroids. That is exactly what that match was. Hangman Page ends Jon Moxley's reign of terror and is the new AEW World Champion, dethroning Jon Moxley and ending his reign of terror. Also, we're going to be talking about Kazuchika Okada versus Kenny Omega. We're also going to be talking about Mercedes Monet versus Toni Storm, the tag team match between the Young Bucks and Swerve Strickland and Will Osprey. A fantastic match at All In. Easily the match of the night. But we're going to be talking about all this and much more right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. Before we get into all this craziness, please make sure to like and subscribe to the WrestleHavoc channel right here on YouTube, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And as the Virgin referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Also, if you guys are watching the WrestleHavoc Podcast on WNN platforms, whether that is the YouTube channel, the Facebook page, or on the WNN app, I thank you guys so much for watching the show. And without any further ado, let's start talking about AEW All In. AEW All In, man. Easily right now, if you really want to think about it, AEW All In is their equivalent to WrestleMania. And man, it was a fantastic show. I really enjoyed the show for what it was. It was a great show from top to bottom. Now, granted, it did start off on a low note, and that low note, if you really want to think about it, was essentially the Adam Cole news. The Adam Cole news is was really the thing that kind of derailed the show in the beginning. Because if you guys don't know, Adam Cole started off, and well, he didn't kick off the show, but we knew on the pre-show that Adam Cole sustained an injury and he was going to be out of action. Now, why is this a big deal? It was a big deal because of the fact that Adam Cole this is by far Adam Cole's third injury. He suffered his first injury all the way back at the first Forbidden Door, all the way back in 2022, and he had that concussion. He was out for almost a whole year. And then after that, of course, he came back. He had the great storyline with MJF, but of course, at Grand Slam back in 2023, I believe it was he broke his ankle when he was jumping off of the elevated ramp, and that was where he sustained his second injury. And then he came back last year, and everybody was happy, only to find out that from what it looks like, he has suffered a concussion. He wasn't feeling well the day of the show and had to pull out of the show last minute. The timing, I will say, of Adam Cole is absolutely terrible. If you're Adam Cole, I mean, I'm going to be honest, man, I feel really bad for Adam Cole. Really, really, really bad for Adam Cole, considering the fact that Adam Cole when it comes to a lot of people, was considered to be one of the nicest guys in the AEW locker room. And it really does suck, man. It really does suck if you're Adam Cole. The number one thing I want to do right here on this show is give my well wishes to Adam Cole. I wish him a speedy recovery. He went out and relinquished the TNT title, and he cut a heartfelt promo. He cut a heartfelt promo. He was getting emotional, and it literally brought down the whole crowd. The entire crowd, if you really think about it, was in tears when it came to this whole scenario. But Adam Cole, man, Adam Cole's going to be out for a while. From what it looks like, we did not know the nature of his injury. From what it looks like, it's probably a concussion. That's what it seems like. It's probably a concussion, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens. He's going to be out for a significant amount of time from AEW. This is Adam Cole's third injury, and unfortunately, if you're Adam Cole, it just really does suck, man. It really does suck, but we're gonna have to wait and see what happens. But as of right now, Adam Cole is going to be out for a significant amount of time. And originally, he was supposed to face Kyle Fletcher for the TNT title, and that ended up being a 4-way. But overall, all in Texas as a show. Number one, I have to say this: the production of the show was amazing. I'm the type of person that tends to complain about AEW's production quality, not their production quality necessarily, but I'm the type of person that tends to complain about their production overall, because I feel like sometimes their production team tends to make really silly mistakes by showing a guy blading, all that type of stuff. But I will say, man, the hats off to the AEW production team, because the set design for All In Texas, I mean, the visual of All In looked amazing. It looked absolutely amazing. It literally felt like a WrestleMania. If you really want to take things into consideration, the show felt like a WrestleMania. It really did. It felt like WrestleMania, from the opening pyro, everything, all about that. It literally felt like a WrestleMania. And here's another photo of the pyro that took place at All In Texas. The visuals of Globe Life Field was just off the chain. And the card itself, if there's two things that I can complain about when it comes to All In Texas, is either, number one, the match placement of the show, I feel like, is a common issue when it comes to AEW pay-per-views. It is a common issue. I feel like match placement, AEW needs to do a better job where to place their matches, because you can have a scenario where one match outshines the other match, and you really do not want to have that. The second complaint that I have with this show is, and I know a lot of people are probably going to get mad at me, but the show was way too long. The show was way too long. I felt like, and this is not just the case with All In. I understand that this is their biggest show of the year, and look, I will say, them starting at 3 o'clock was a smart move, because if this show started at the normal time, because considering this show was taking place in Texas, it could have easily started at 8 o'clock, but knowing that WWE was holding Saturday night's main event, they held the show at 3 p.m. instead, considering they're in the U.S. If the show was in the U.K., it would have been the same deal. But they specifically moved All In Texas from 8 p.m. to 3 p.m., considering the fact that, of course, WWE was counter-programming them with 2 shows on that night, and, of course, they have another show tonight with Evolution. But, I mean, the show went well over, I believe it was like 5 hours. And considering that this show is AEW's, you can say, WrestleMania, I would understand it. But this is a problem with every single AEW pay-per-view. Every single AEW pay-per-view is well over 5 hours. Like, the show would start at 8 p.m. and the show would end damn well to midnight. And by that point, everybody's all burnt out. And I feel like that is an issue that AEW really needs to resolve ASAP, because, again, I understand that you are trying to pay $50 for a pay-per-view and you want to give the viewer the best possible card that you can. But at the same time, there's an old saying, quantity or quality, not quantity, quality over quantity. And I feel like AEW really needs to focus on quality over quantity, because if you don't focus on quality over quantity and instead you focus on quantity over quality, then you're going to have a lot of matches that don't necessarily need to be on the show. And AEW tends to run into that problem with every single pay-per-view. But overall, man, All In Texas was a fantastic show. By far, in my opinion, their best pay-per-view in 2025. And of course, it all capped off with the main event of Jon Moxley versus Hangman Page, which we will be talking about later in this show, but we're going to be going through the card match by match. I'm not going to be telling you guys like every single move that took place, but I'm going to do a quick recap of All In Texas. Of course, the first match on the main card was the Ops versus the Death Riders. Yes, the Ops versus the Death Riders. They were honestly... if you want to talk about a match that didn't really need to be on the card, it was this match. Not even be on the card, but if you really think about it, this match did not need to open the show. We had the Ops defeating the Death Riders for the AEW Trios titles, and after the match was over, you had the Death Riders essentially take out Samoa Joe. They took out Samoa Joe, and basically Samoa Joe got stretchered in a stretcher. Overall thoughts on the match? The match was not bad, but again, it was the wrong match to open up All In Texas, especially if it's a big stadium show. I felt like it was honestly the wrong match to open the stadium show with. If there was any match that could have easily had opened the show, it was either A, Swerve Strickland and Will Osprey versus the Young Bucks, or the Casino Gauntlet. And the next match after this opening match with the Ops and the Death Riders was the men's Casino Gauntlet match. The Casino Gauntlet match, of course, consisted of a lot of wrestlers: MJF, Konosuke Takeshita, Bandito, Mark Briscoe. I believe I just said MJF, but consisted of all of those wrestlers. And I remember talking about this on last week's show, but I stated this. This is the number one thing that I stated. The outcome of the men's Casino Gauntlet all depended on whoever won the Casino Gauntlet essentially determined the winner of the main event. What do I mean by that? There was only two logical outcomes when it came to the Casino Gauntlet. There was only two logical outcomes. MJF, considering he's been teasing going after the AEW World Title once again for weeks on television, and two, Darby Allin. Those were the two logical choices. But even though those were the two logical choices, there was only one right choice when it came to the Casino Gauntlet. And that right choice was MJF. Now, granted, Darby Allin did not return. He returned on this show, but he didn't return in the Casino Gauntlet. If he had returned and essentially pin whoever and win the Casino Gauntlet, Darby Allin would have eventually gained that title shot, and you already knew what the outcome was going to be with Jon Moxley and Hangman Page. And that match in and of itself, there was only one right outcome, and one right outcome. That's it. Like, Jon Moxley winning the world title was going to be the worst decision that AEW would have made if they had gone with Jon Moxley. But we'll talk about that match later. MJF won the Casino Gauntlet, and he is now the new number one contender for the AEW World Title. Now, we do not know the stipulation when it comes to the contract. And what I mean by that when it comes to the contract is, as you guys know, last year, Christian Cage won the Casino Gauntlet, and they were doing the whole cash-in deal where a wrestler could cash in at any time, very similar to the Money in the Bank with WWE. But we do not know the current deal when it comes to the contract that MJF has. But I will say, I think they should keep the whole cash-in concept, even though it's been done to death in the WWE. I think with AEW, they could have their own spin on it. I don't know how exactly they would do that, but with a guy like MJF and his character, I think it would fit him perfectly. But we're going to have to wait and see what happens. Not only that, I think it'd be a great feud with MJF and Hangman Page. Of course, they wrestled earlier this year in March at the Revolution pay-per-view at the Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles, and they had a tremendous match. They actually opened the show, and if anything, that was the actual highlight of that entire pay-per-view. Now, granted, we also did have great matches. We did have the Hollywood ending between Mariah May and Toni Storm, and we also had the steel cage match between Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher. But out of all of the matches there, even though all those matches were amazing, I really loved the story behind Hangman Page and MJF, and I think they're going to have a full-fledged feud after All In, because clearly Hangman Page right now is the top guy of AEW. We had the four-way match, Dustin Rhodes versus Daniel Garcia versus Kyle Fletcher versus Sammy Guevara. Again, originally this match was supposed to be Kyle Fletcher versus Adam Cole for the TNT title. Adam Cole was originally supposed to defend his title, but of course, due to real-life circumstances, he didn't feel good coming into the show, and unfortunately, from what it looks like, he dealt with a concussion. I believe it was earlier this week, but from what it looks like, of course, concussions have long-term effects. Adam Cole pulled out of the show and relinquished the TNT title. Again, a very emotional moment. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Adam Cole. Our support goes out to Adam Cole because, again, it sucks when you're a wrestler to be injured because you are sidelined and you're going to miss out on a lot of possible things. And Adam Cole was definitely one of those guys. But Adam Cole's going to be out for a while, and AEW, of course, had a scramble. They had a scramble for the whoever's going to wrestle for the TNT title. And they brought in Dustin Rhodes and Sammy Guevara, which in my opinion didn't really make sense considering they wrestled in the pre-show, but they wrestled for a second time in this match, and Daniel Garcia was also in this match, as well as Kyle Fletcher, who was originally supposed to face Adam Cole. Originally, I will say, the match itself was not the best, but I'm not going to point the blame at any of one of the wrestlers, considering the nature of the situation. This was a match that was thrown together last minute, unfortunately, because of the whole deal with Adam Cole. But the match itself was not the best. The crowd, for the majority portion of this match, was just flat out dead. And I don't blame him. I'm not even going to blame the crowd. Usually when it comes to dead crowds in wrestling, I always tend to blame the crowd. In this case, I'm not going to blame the crowd because, again, when Adam Cole cut that emotional promo, everybody, and I mean everybody, was just bummed out. Everybody was bummed out. And I remember reacting to this because I was live streaming when I was watching the pay-per-view. Dustin Rhodes got the win, and I remember saying during the match, there's only one logical guy to win this match, and it's Kyle Fletcher. With the way that AEW has been building Kyle Fletcher, you would expect them to put the belt on Kyle Fletcher, but they didn't go that route. And I will say this, when Dustin Rhodes got the pinfall, I was kind of upset. I was kind of upset because Kyle Fletcher was right there. And with the way that they are building Kyle Fletcher, you would expect him to win, but he didn't. But then I came to the realization over time, looking back, it was probably the right move that AEW could have made because, number one, Dustin Rhodes winning, especially in Texas, popped the crowd, and at a time where the crowd was just kind of bummed out. And they were relatively quiet. Not to mention, it left the crowd with a good high note, and you can't really blame AEW for putting the belt on Dustin Rhodes. But I will say, Dustin Rhodes is not going to have the TNT title for a long. He's not going to have a lengthy title reign with that belt. Eventually, Kyle Fletcher is going to go after the TNT title, and he's going to beat Dustin Rhodes for the title. I do not know when, but he's gonna eventually dethrone. I don't want to say dethrone, but he's going to beat Dustin Rhodes, and Dustin Rhodes is going to drop the title. But moving on, we had Swerve Strickland and Will Osprey versus the Young Bucks. This match was off the chain. This match was amazing. This match was arguably one of my favorite matches of the entire night. And I say that because, number one, I felt like one of the bright spots about this match was you got to see the old Young Bucks. What do I mean by the old Young Bucks? Of course, the Young Bucks are still heels. They're in probably their lowest point as their characters go. They're not really the best. I'm not really the fan of the heel EVPs. It's just very WWE-ish in my opinion. But I will say, in this match, you definitely saw the old Young Bucks in this match, like doing all the high spots, everything that the Young Bucks are known for. You know, your bang for your bucks, the BTE trigger, all that type of stuff. You saw a lot of high spots in this match. Not only that, the chemistry that Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland have as a tag team is bar none. Absolutely amazing. I love the chemistry that both men have as a tag team. Not to mention the story and the stipulation that was involved in this match. Of course, the stipulation that was involved in this match was if Swerve and Osprey lose, then that means that Swerve and Osprey cannot challenge for the AEW World title for a whole year. But if the Young Bucks lose, they lose their status as EVPs, of course, only in kayfabe. And for you non-wrestling fans watching, kayfabe means creating the illusion that wrestling is real. And, of course, the Young Bucks are the EVPs in real life. They are the executive vice presidents in real life, but also in storyline, they are the executive vice presidents. But they lost this match, and everything about this match was just flat out amazing. Everything about it was off the charts. Both wrestlers both teams, I should say, tore the house down. They tore the house down at Globe Life Field. Again, it felt very reminiscent of a Young Bucks match years ago. I'm talking about 5-6 years ago. Those are the types of matches that I want to see the Young Bucks wrestle in. But some of the spots that we saw in this match was, of course, that sequence with Will Osprey and one of the Young Bucks, either Matt or Nick, doing the super kick party, and then they were doing back and forths. And then, of course, they did the double Canadian Destroyer. They did the double Sky Twister press. And the finish of the match was off the charts. I loved the finish of the match. It was essentially a combination with the house call and the hidden blade. Of course, the house call is the finisher of Swerve Strickland, and the hidden blade is the finisher of Will Osprey, or the Stormbreaker, whatever you want to call it. But the finish to the match was absolutely amazing. Not only that, of course, there was a lot of drama in the match, considering Will Osprey and Swerve Strickland. There was a little bit of tension between the two. Even though they're great friends, there was a lot of tension in the build-up to this match, considering when Will Osprey stated the stipulation, essentially Swerve Strickland was kind of upset when Will Osprey stated the stipulation because, of course, Swerve Strickland is a former AEW World Champion, and he wanted to go after the AEW World Championship, so he was upset about that. And that was such great drama that was really implemented in this match. But when it comes to Will Osprey and Swerve Strickland, both men, again, they have great tag team chemistry. Of course, they are singles wrestlers, but as a team, they are phenomenal. And I would love to see more of Swerve Strickland and Will Osprey because they're just that damn good at what they do. But in the end, Will Osprey and Swerve Strickland got the win. They got the win, and they are, they won. They beat the EVPs, and the Young Bucks are no longer, in kayfabe, of course, executive vice presidents of All Elite Wrestling. All right, moving on. We had, of course, the women's Casino Gauntlet match, and I'm going to be honest, the women's Casino Gauntlet match was 10 times better than the men's Casino Gauntlet match. I feel like I enjoyed more the women's Casino Gauntlet match than I did the men's Casino Gauntlet match, but that is not to say the men's Casino Gauntlet match was bad. I'm just saying if you compare the two, the women's match was 10 times better than the men's. But the right woman won, and the rat woman was, of course, Athena. Athena was the only right decision in terms of this whole women's Casino Gauntlet match, and I did a whole rant on Athena a couple of streams ago about how she was not being utilized on AEW TV. They are utilizing her, but they are not utilizing her on AEW programming. They are utilizing her on Ring of Honor. Now, I understand that they would utilize her on Ring of Honor, considering they want to build up Ring of Honor, but let's be honest, Tony Khan bought the company all the way back in 2022. Do any of you viewers that watch AEW's programming, do you guys watch Ring of Honor? No, you don't. Even though they deliver great shows and great pay-per-views, weekly TV, nobody really watches. It's essentially AEW Dark. It's a show where a lot of jobbers wrestle at. I don't want to necessarily say jobbers. Maybe I'm going a little bit far-fetched. But it's a show that nobody watches, and even worse, it's a show that you have to pay for monthly. You have to pay $10 a month to watch a show that nobody watches. That is the biggest problem when it comes to Athena, in my opinion. And, of course, even though they booked Athena tremendously, I want to see her being booked in AEW. That's what I want to see. I want to see Athena being booked in AEW, and finally we're going to be having a chance when it comes to Athena, and it's going to be fun. So Athena won the women's Casino Gauntlet. We had the Hurt Syndicate. The Hurt Syndicate taking on the Patriarchy, consisting of Christian Cage and Nick Wayne, which we will be talking about, and Kevin Knight and Mike Bailey, the tag team known as Jet Speed. So overall, this match was not bad. I didn't really care for it. Honestly, it was a match that could have easily taken place on a random episode of Dynamite, but that is just me. But I will say, everybody was not talking about the match. Everybody was talking about the post-match angle. And that post-match angle, of course, consisted of Nick Wayne turning on Christian Cage. Of course, Christian Cage is a dastardly heel, probably one of the best heels, not only in AEW, but one of the best heels in professional wrestling. And Christian Cage, of course, was, I don't want to say abusing Nick Wayne, but in storyline, treating Nick Wayne like garbage. And Nick Wayne was tired of it. But what happened? Nick Wayne, instead of Christian Cage being the one turning heel, even though he's already a heel on Nick Wayne was the one that turned heel on Christian Cage. And what happened there was, of course, he attacked Christian Cage and Mother Wayne, Nick Wayne's mom, and Kip Sabian. And what happened there? What happened after that? We had a returning Adam Copeland. Yes, Edge made his return after FTR turned on Adam Cole. And by the way, FTR was involved in this. They were actually on commentary throughout the majority of the entire match. But when it comes to this whole moment, Adam Copeland, of course, made his return. And he was doing the typical thing that a lot of wrestlers tend to do whenever there is a run-in in any particular moment. They tend to do their actual entrance when they're doing a run-in. We've seen it with Penta. We've seen it with Jeff Hardy. Now we saw it with Adam Copeland. Now, in this case, it was a little bit different considering Adam Copeland has been feuding with Christian Cage. But he came back and he essentially saved his former best friend, Christian Cage. And instead of going on the microphone and stating, "Go F yourself," like Christian Cage did a couple of years ago when Edge first debuted with AEW, Christian Cage instead, or I should say Adam Copeland was stated on the microphone, "Go find yourself." He told Christian Cage, "Go find yourself," and then he left the ring. So one of the things that I really liked about that was I loved how they didn't immediately just go straight to the reunion of Edge and Christian. I'm very glad that they didn't go straight into that reunion because I feel like they could have squandered it considering everything that Christian Cage in storyline has put Edge through in AEW. And I'm sorry that I'm calling him Edge because I can't stand the name Cope, and I'm just used to Edge. I'm not used to the name Adam Copeland. I'm used to Edge. So if we're going to be talking about Edge, we're going to be calling him Edge. We're not going to be calling him Adam Copeland. But I feel like when it comes to Adam Copeland or Edge and Christian Cage, I feel like they really need to do the slow build when it comes to Edge and Christian Cage and doing the full reunion between the two, because eventually they are going to come back together and they're going to be a tag team and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. I'm very excited to see where that goes. But Adam Copeland made the save and he told Christian Cage, instead of "Go F yourself," he told him to go find himself. So I love what they are doing there when it comes to Edge and Christian Cage. All right. We had the first of three main events. As timeless Toni Storm took on the CEO of professional wrestling, the current TBS champion, and she holds 5 other titles, by the way. She holds the CMLL women's title and 4 other independent titles. Mercedes Monet has 6 belts against, of course, Mercedes Monet. It was Toni Storm versus Mercedes Monet. What are my thoughts on this match? This match was fantastic. There's only one reason why AEW booked this match for All In. It's because it was the biggest match that AEW could have booked. A lot of people tend to complain. They tend to complain about Mercedes Monet's booking. And I'm not going to name any names here. But a lot of people tend to accuse Mercedes Monet of having creative control in real life. Yes, they are saying that Mercedes Monet has creative control. Mercedes Monet, I repeat, Mercedes Monet does not have creative control. Why does she not have creative control? I'll tell you why. Even though she's getting paid millions of dollars by Tony Khan, some might even say Tony Khan is overpaying, but you can't really make the argument of Tony Khan overpaying wrestlers considering if you really look at the landscape, wrestlers are vastly underpaid. And honestly, the fact that we have a promoter that is willing to pay the money is fantastic, but that's another story for another time. Mercedes Monet, yes, she's getting paid millions of dollars by AEW, but she is somebody who is the pure definition of marketable. I talk about marketability when we talk about wrestlers in the WWE. A lot of people were complaining about Jey Uso winning the Royal Rumble and going after Gunther for the world title at WrestleMania. They were complaining about that. Now, granted, if you look at Jey Uso's title reign nowadays is deemed as a failure. But it's not Jey Uso's fault. It's WWE's fault. It's WWE's fault considering WWE just did not have any plans for Jey Uso after he won the world title. But when he won the Royal Rumble all the way back in February, what did I say? I stated that the main reason as to why WWE had Jey Uso win the Royal Rumble was because of the fact that he is the definition of marketability. WWE knows how to market their wrestlers. AEW, throughout its 6-year history, didn't necessarily know how to market their wrestlers. Now they're finding their footing when it comes to marketing their wrestlers. Mercedes Monet knew how to market herself. And she's done a great job at marketing herself, whether you like her or hate her. Mercedes Monet is one of the best female wrestlers in the world. You may say that her run in AEW has been lackluster, and I can agree with you. I haven't really been enjoying Mercedes Monet's run in AEW. But you cannot sit here and say that Mercedes Monet has creative control when there is one man and one man only that has the final say. And that man is Tony Khan. Tony Khan is the one that has the final say. He is the one that has the final say in all of the decisions. And the same people that constantly accuse Mercedes Monet of having quote-unquote creative control and acts like Hulk Hogan, that does not work well for me, brother. They are like these people clearly do not know the difference. These people do not know the difference between creative input and creative control. Creative input and creative control are vastly two different things. Vastly two different things. Creative input is you not having the final say, but you have a say in what you want to do, and you're able to talk it out with the promoter. That is input. Creative control is essentially you are under contract to a promotion, and you, the wrestler, has the final say, not the promoter. You think Tony Khan is willingly Tony Khan is a nice guy, but I don't think he's the type of promoter that would give Mercedes Monet full creative control. Not to mention, why do I talk about this whole creative control deal? It's because it was a big talking point throughout this whole week. And you had Sean Ross Sapp and another content creator who, by the way, I love watching, but I'm not going to name his name because I don't want to throw shade at all with anybody. But I watch this content creator. I think he's phenomenal. He's a big inspiration for me. But they've been talking and arguing over Mercedes Monet and her creative control, which she doesn't have creative control. Mercedes Monet does not have creative control whatsoever. It makes absolutely no sense for people to think that. And those people look really stupid considering the outcome of this match had Mercedes Monet actually lose. Mercedes Monet actually lost this match, which is very shocking to me. Everybody was like, oh my God, we're going to have Mercedes Monet lose, or we're going to have Mercedes Monet win. Oh my God, I don't want to see that. Oh my God, I don't want to see that. But they actually had Mercedes Monet lose. And who won the match? Timeless Toni Storm retained the AEW Women's World Championship. In a fantastic match, by the way. Both women tore the house down. They really tore the house down. They had a great, entertaining match. Toni Storm is the pure definition of somebody coming from WWE after they have been humiliated in WWE and completely reinventing their careers. Same goes with guys like Swerve Strickland. He came from the WWE. He immediately joined the main roster with Hit Row, and they all got cut. Swerve Strickland goes to AEW and immediately changed the trajectory of Swerve Strickland. But Mercedes Monet lost. Where does she go from here? She's still the TBS champion. She still has 5 other titles. Say what you want about Mercedes Monet and her booking in AEW. But if there's one thing that I can say when it comes to Mercedes Monet, is that the story of Mercedes Monet is just beginning. And that story is her downfall. Now, it would have been a little bit better if she had won the title. It would have been way more compelling. But her downfall is going to be an even more compelling story when it comes to Mercedes Monet. Not to mention, I don't think this is going to be the last match that we are going to be seeing when it comes to Toni Storm and Mercedes Monet. I don't think this is going to be the last match that we're going to be seeing between the two. And I say that because Mercedes Monet and Toni Storm are the two top females in AEW. Not to mention, I feel like we're probably going to be getting a rematch at Forbidden Door. If anything, both these women should have a trilogy of matches. Yeah, I said it. They should have a trilogy of matches. Now, what do I see happening? Well, Toni Storm was the only one that defended a championship in this first match at All In. What if we head to Forbidden Door and we have their second match, but in this case, Toni Storm is not going to be defending her women's title. Mercedes is going to be defending her TBS title. So it's going to be, the second match is going to be Mercedes Monet versus Toni Storm for the TBS championship, not the AEW women's title. And then what happens there? Maybe Toni Storm loses and Mercedes Monet retains her title. But then we fast forward to All Out in Toronto in September, and they have the rubber match. And the rubber match ends up being a winner take all. We're going to have to wait and see what happens, but it's just a thought that is just coming out of my head. It's just a thought. But it's a very, very, very compelling thought in my opinion. Overall, I thought Mercedes Monet and Toni Storm did a phenomenal job. A phenomenal job in this match. Moving on. We had, of course, Kenny Omega, the Best Bout Machine, the current international champion, facing off against Kazuchika Okada. Yes, one of the best wrestlers in the world, one of the best wrestlers in Japan. The current AEW Continental Champion. And of course, they were going to unify both titles. And the new title was going to be called the AEW Unified Championship. Now, I will say, you guys already know my thoughts on the AEW Unified Championship. You guys already know my thoughts. I think it's a stupid name. But this is not going to be a scenario in which both the international and continental title are going to be retired. They're not going to be retired. If anything, the unified title is just a trophy title in the sense of you holding both the international and continental titles. It would have been way more interesting if they had named that new championship the AEW Intercontinental Championship, because there's no reason for you to have an international title and there's no reason for you to have a continental title. It just doesn't make any sense. Not to mention, I feel like the stipulation when it comes to the Continental Classic, you shouldn't fight for a mid-card championship. I'm sorry, that's what it is. It is a mid-card championship. It is not a title that, you know, you can, it is not a world championship. For the Continental Classic, what they should do is whoever wins the Continental Classic gets a title shot maybe at a future date, maybe at Revolution, but do something like that. But whatever. This was the fifth bout between Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada. Both men have had classic matches in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Classic matches. Their first match was beloved by everybody. But of course, I would like to consider their most famous match was their second match at Dominion in 2017. That match ended in a time limit draw. It's a fantastic match, but we are in their fifth match. And usually when it comes to Okada versus Omega matches, one of the reasons as to why those matches are very good is not only because of the fact that Kenny Omega and Okada have great chemistry with one another, but they have great psychology in their matches. They have great psychology in their matches, and they do brilliant storytelling. And the storytelling was very similar to their previous matches, and the chemistry that they had was very similar to their previous matches. Normally, when it comes to a Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada match, the matches tend to start off really slow. And they're like split in separate tiers. So like the first tier would be really slow. The second tier, they'd start to speed it up a little bit. And then the final tier is really where you are more invested in. That is the beauty of Kazuchika Okada versus Kenny Omega. They slowly, in these separate tiers, tend to ramp up the intensity more and more and more as the minutes pass by in their matches. That's what makes Okada versus Omega very special. Of course, Kenny Omega had time off in AEW because he was suffering through diverticulitis, and he was out for a significant amount of time throughout the majority of 2024, and they definitely played the whole diverticulitis thing in this match, of course, with Okada constantly targeting the stomach of Kenny Omega. It was great storytelling, I will say. But if you were to compare this match to the previous Okada versus Omega matches, you coming in should have known that this match was probably going to be nothing like the old Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada matches. And I say that because of the fact that, number one, there was interference in this match. There was interference in this match, which honestly, there did not need to be any types of interference in this match whatsoever. There needed to be no interference at all when it came to this match. The involvement of the Don Callis family, in my opinion, they even though in a way it kind of made sense, they easily could have just swayed away from it. And that was it. But the interference, was to me was just not necessary. Not to mention, I feel like, remember how I stated earlier how the Okada and Omega matches are very, very good because they're like split in separate tiers. They start off slow, but then they tend to ramp up the intensity. Right as soon as they were ramping up the intensity in the match ended. The match ended, and that kind of disappointed a lot of people. And earlier in this podcast, I talked about match placement, and I feel like AEW putting all three main events. There's only one realistic main event. There's only one match that you pay the show for, and of course, the match that everybody paid the pay-per-view for was Hangman Page versus Jon Moxley. But the card itself was phenomenal. But I'm going to say this right here and right now. I think the problem with AEW and their match placement is that they tend to put all of their best matches next to each other. And if you do that, you run into a problem. And that problem is matches outshining the other matches that are important. It would have been better if they had like maybe Mercedes Monet versus Toni Storm, maybe in the beginning of the match, Omega versus Okada in the middle of the card, and of course the main event that being Hangman Page versus Jon Moxley. If you had balanced out your three major matches for this show, maybe Okada versus Omega would have been a little bit better than it was. I'm not saying that the match was bad. The match was actually really good. They had great chemistry with one another. I'm just saying that it would have been a little bit better if they were in a different placement in the card. I feel like that had a lot to do with this match not being, the best out of all the other Kenny Omega versus Okada matches, but that is just me. But I will say, both men had a great match. Again, the interference didn't need to be there, but it is what it is. Sway in the chat, he stated this, and I quote, "I think they got one more match, that being Okada versus Omega." I can see that, but I don't know, man. I don't think that's going to be the case, but it is what it is. We're going to have to wait and see what happens in the future. But as of right now, Kazuchika Okada is the new unified champion, and he's going to be doing a lot with that title. All right, moving on. Of course, we had the main event. The main event was Hangman Adam Page, the millennial cowboy, the face of AEW. And you're going to be hearing me say a lot about that on this show, versus Jon Moxley for the AEW World Championship. And that match, of course, was a Texas death match. Now, you know how AEW operates. Whenever they have a Texas death match, these people tend to go all out when it comes to the Texas death match. And when I say that they went all out for this match, they legitimately went all out for this match. I kid you not. They went all out for this match. It was absolutely insane. And I say that because if you look, a lot of people, and rightfully so, by the way, compared Jon Moxley versus Hangman Page last night to Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns 2. They compared that match to their WrestleMania 40 match. And I don't blame you because I compared it as well. This match was very similar to Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns. But even though it felt very similar to Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns last year at WrestleMania 40 in Philadelphia, it was kind of AEW's twist on Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes. With all the interference, but not only just the interference, but all of the violence. If everybody knows how WWE operates. WWE is very fan friendly. Now with the new regime, they're starting to utilize more blood nowadays. But if you compare the usage of blood, even now that is used in WWE, it's nothing compared to the amount of blood usage that AEW uses on their matches, especially when it comes to, matches like the Texas Death Match. Blood in AEW has been a major criticism of mine and a lot of people, because a lot of people believe that AEW tends to go a little bit overboard with the violence. And I understand that sometimes when you are the alternative, which that is what AEW is the alternative to WWE, you have to do things that AEW doesn't do. And some people can even create the argument that AEW utilizing violence like this is what stands out is what makes AEW stands out from WWE. And I can totally understand that. I can totally understand where those people are coming from. But still, I mean, when it comes to the violence, I feel like sometimes AEW tends to do it in matches that don't need to be utilized. So like they would utilize blood in a random match on a random episode of Collision, and you're like, wait, why are they utilizing blood? It just doesn't make any sense. But still, when it comes to this Texas Death Match, you already knew what you were getting yourself into. You already knew what you were getting yourself into when it came to this match, and I'm going to sit here and say this right here and right now. This was one of the best AEW pay-per-view main events that the company has done in its 6-year history. AEW has only existed for 6 years, and they had phenomenal pay-per-view main events. Phenomenal pay-per-view main events. I mean, off the top of my head, of course, we had the Iron Man match between Bryan Danielson and MJF at Revolution 2023. Of course, we had Adam Cole versus Hangman Page, Kenny Omega versus Hangman Page, where Hangman Page won his first AEW World Championship. We had a lot of great AEW pay-per-view main events. A lot of great pay-per-view main events. Jon Moxley versus MJF, where MJF won his first World Championship. A lot of great pay-per-view main events. This felt different. It's no secret that AEW, of course, for the last 9 months, we're focusing a lot on the Death Riders. The Death Riders have been a major disappointment amongst a lot of the fan base in AEW. A major disappointment. And it has nothing to do with the group itself. I think the group itself, and I talked about this not only on my podcasts, not only on my live streams, but also on my videos that I put out on my YouTube channel. The Death Riders, the issues with the Death Riders is not necessarily the group itself, it's the way that they are presented, the way that they are being booked. Because if you really think about it, into this Death Rider storyline, there was nothing that felt different about the Death Riders if you compared them to any other heels. Because any other heel would do the exact same things that the Death Riders would do. You know what I'm saying? They would have done the exact same things as what the Death Riders would do. And I think that was the biggest issue with the Death Riders. Not only that, I felt like AEW dragged the Death Riders mode of a little bit too long. And that's what made the Death Rider storyline a failure. The Death Riders were the pure definition of go-away heat. Even though I can create the argument that people just at least for like the last month and a half started to get used to the Death Riders. I think the inclusion of Gabe Kidd made the group way more interesting. Gabe Kidd is freaking awesome, by the way. If you guys don't know who Gabe Kidd is a wrestler in New Japan. And honestly, if you really want to take this into consideration, Gabe Kidd is, as I talked about marketability, he is the pure definition of marketability. You can, I don't know when Gabe Kidd's contract with AEW or with New Japan is up, but if AEW even gets the chance of picking this guy up, dude, AEW should really look into signing Gabe Kidd once his New Japan contract is up, because he is that damn good at what he does. He is phenomenal. His work is amazing. And when it comes to him being involved in the Death Riders, I felt like it made I felt like it made the group a little bit more interesting, in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? It made the group way more interesting. And of course, Hangman Page won the finals of the Owen Hart Cup tournament in that phenomenal match with Will Osprey at the last AEW pay-per-view, which was Double or Nothing in Arizona. And since then, Hangman Page has been the talk of the town in AEW. Hangman Page has been, if you really want to think about it, the bright spot of this whole down period that AEW has been going through throughout the last 2 years. With, of course, the whole CM Punk drama, which, by the way, Hangman Page started. But it's ironic. Hangman Page started the CM Punk drama, but throughout the entirety of the CM Punk drama, he was the most professional guy out of the entirety of the whole situation with CM Punk and the Elite, which is insane to think, but it's actually very true. Nobody talks about that. But we're not here to talk about CM Punk. We're here to talk about Hangman Page. Hangman Page. I posted this on my Facebook page. Hangman Page is AEW. The story of AEW from their highs and lows is essentially the story of Hangman Page. Throughout the last 2 to 3 years, of course, Hangman Page, not only from a booking standpoint, but from a character standpoint, has gone through a low point in his life. He won the AEW World Championship, had a lackluster run with the title. A lot of people say he had a lackluster run. I actually enjoyed his first run as the AEW World Champion. He had great matches. He had great matches with Adam Cole. He had a great Texas Death Match with Lance Archer. And more importantly, bro, he had 2 amazing matches with Bryan Danielson. That first match at that Winter is Coming show back in December of 2021 with Hangman Page versus Bryan Danielson, that match ended in a time limit draw. One of the best matches in Dynamite's history. I urge you guys to watch Hangman Page versus Bryan Danielson. Their first match. I actually had the privilege of actually watching their second match in person at the Prudential Center. They did wrestle at the Prudential Center. But Hangman Page, he did have great matches, but of course, in his first run as the AEW World Champion, was he realistically the main character? Was he realistically the top guy? No, he was not. Even though Hangman Page had the hardware, he had the world title, he was the world champion, Hangman Page was not the top guy. There was another guy on the roster who was a way bigger star than him. That was CM Punk. CM Punk was the top star of AEW, even though Hangman Page had the world championship. More people cared about CM Punk than they did about Hangman Page. Of course, all the CM Punk drama escalated, and then, of course, a year later, CM Punk ended up getting fired. That's a whole nother story for another time. But when it comes to Hangman Page, of course, Hangman Page started to go through a downward spiral from a character standpoint, not a real-life standpoint, but from a character standpoint, and the storytelling was brilliant. And it wasn't until Swerve Strickland came into the picture and reignited, and I talked about this in a fairly recent video that I uploaded last week on my channel. He reignited the fire of Hangman Page. He reignited the fire of Hangman Page, and I mean literally reignited the fire of Hangman Page, because Hangman Page actually burned this man's house down. But the feud between Swerve Strickland and Hangman Page was one of the best feuds, not only in AEW, but one of the best feuds in modern wrestling, in my opinion. It was an amazing, amazing, amazing feud. Of course, they had their first match at WrestleDream, the first WrestleDream back in 2023. But then, of course, that match is overshadowed by the, ironically, Texas Death Match that Hangman had with Swerve Strickland. Now, keep in mind, Hangman Page has had, let's say, I think it's like 4 Texas Death Matches. He had the first Texas Death Match was with Lance Archer. The second one was with Jon Moxley, ironically, at Revolution 2023, which was an amazing match. Then that same year, he had a Texas Death Match with Swerve Strickland, which, of course, Hangman lost. And then, since then, in storyline, Hangman Page has been going even further down with his downward spiral, and all he cared about was ruining not only Swerve Strickland's career, but Swerve Strickland's life, because Swerve Strickland turned the whole situation with Hangman Page personal when he broke into his house. So what did Hangman Page do in retaliation? You know what Hangman Page did? Well, AEW, ironically, this was right after Swerve Strickland, of course, won the AEW World title and then dropped it to Bryan Danielson at All In. All Out was just a week later. AEW showed that Swerve Strickland bought and purchased his childhood home. And you, the fan watching on television, you knew, wait, why are they showing Swerve Strickland buying his childhood home? Well, if you watch wrestling and they show something like that, you know exactly what the hell is going to happen. What happened? There was a contract signing segment between both Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland. Hangman Page didn't show up because Hangman Page had other motives. Hangman Page went legitimately into Swerve's house. Now, you can say it's justified. I don't know. Say what you want. I'm not here to discuss morals. I'm just here talking about the storyline. Hangman Page goes into Swerve's house, and what does he do? He actually says goodbye legitimately to Swerve's house because he actually lit a fire and burned down Swerve's house in one of the, in my opinion, one of the best Dynamite segments throughout the show's 6+ year history. It's an amazing, and the shot of Hangman Page sitting in a chair while a house is burning down right in front of him, behind him, is crazy. It's one of the best visuals I've ever seen in any AEW show, or let alone any wrestling show. Then what happens after that? They had the steel cage match in which, of course, Hangman stuck a needle through the cheek of Swerve Strickland and bashed his brains in with the chair. And let me tell you, the chair shot was loud, but the crowd was even louder. And then, of course, the match ended via referee stoppage. And then when Hangman Page went up on the ramp, he started to go back and started to have second thoughts about what he just did. Like, oh my God, I literally damn near ended this guy's life. You know what I'm saying? That was Hangman Page's story. And then fast forward, of course, he had the Texas Death Match with Christopher Daniels, which I believe was Christopher Daniels' last match. And then Hangman Page, of course, still hated Swerve Strickland for everything that he did. And Swerve Strickland hated Hangman Page for everything that he did. But people need to realize in storyline, Swerve Strickland was the one that started everything. But Hangman Page was then going through a redemption. He was going through a redemption. He was starting to turn from a rebel. He was not even he was a heel, but like not necessarily. He was kind of in the middle, but then he turned into a full-fledged babyface. Of course, he had the match with MJF. And then we fast forward to the Owen Hart Cup tournament, and Hangman Page beat Will Osprey in the finals of the Owen Hart Cup tournament. Meanwhile, all that stuff is happening. The Death Riders are running roughshod all over AEW. And when this match was officially announced, Hangman Page versus Jon Moxley, everybody was worried coming into this show about the outcome. Because, of course, everybody, and I mean everybody, hated the Death Riders. Everybody hated the Death Riders and their presentation, everything. They just did not like the Death Riders at all, because a lot of people viewed the Death Riders as just a failure, and they wanted the Death Rider storyline to end. Everybody was afraid that Hangman Page was going to lose. All of that character development with Hangman Page, and you're going to have him lose in the biggest possible match that he could have in his entire career. Yeah, it was a big concern amongst a lot of wrestling fans. A big concern amongst a lot of wrestling fans, including myself. Even though Hangman Page was the only logical choice to win this match, a part of me kind of felt like, oh my God, what if they have actually Darby Allin come in and... Or what if they have Jon Moxley win and Darby Allin comes in and comes back and he's going to be the guy? I'm going to say this right here and right now. Even though Darby Allin would have made sense, at this day and age, Darby Allin being the guy to dethrone Jon Moxley would have never worked, especially now. And this is no disrespect to Darby Allin, because I like Darby Allin. I think he's fantastic, and I think he's going to be a world champion someday. The reason as to why Darby Allin is not the guy, or was not the guy to dethrone Jon Moxley, was simply because of the fact that he was not on television. He willingly decided to take time off and go climb Mount Everest, which there's literally nothing wrong with that. I'm not here crucifying a Darby Allin for the choices that he makes in life. Darby Allin is a daredevil, and he wants to take risks in his life. Darby Allin in a recent interview said, like, look, I don't want to win the world title because I already feel like I am winning in life. And you know what? I respect Darby for that. Is his lifestyle a little crazy? Yeah, but I still respect Darby Allin for that. I respect Darby. But Darby Allin took time off from television to go climb Mount Everest. Now, if he came back and he immediately challenged Jon Moxley for the world title, how would you think the crowd would react? I think they would still cheer for Darby Allin. But you got a guy in Hangman Page that you have been building for months. And you're going to take that opportunity away from Hangman Page and give it to a guy like Darby Allin, who, by the way, was not on television? Doesn't that scream like a bad look? Doesn't that look like a bad look? Let's be honest. It would have been a bad look. But we were coming into this match expecting the expected. Hangman Page, of course, beat Jon Moxley for the AEW World Championship. Now, the match itself was everything that you would expect from a Texas death match. And I'm going to say this about the Death Riders as well. Even though you hate the Death Riders, I'm going to ask you guys this question. Do you think we could have gotten this type of match and this moment with Hangman Page winning if it wasn't for the last 9 months of the Death Riders running roughshod all over AEW? If it wasn't for the Death Riders, let's be honest, and so, this is a valid argument. And I know a lot of people don't like the Death Riders, but this is very true. Don't you think if there's anything good that we can say about the Death Riders, don't you think that throughout the last 9 months of the Death Riders running roughshod all over AEW, don't you think that if it wasn't for the Death Riders, don't you think we wouldn't have gotten a match like this? Because let me tell you, if the Death Riders weren't around, we probably wouldn't have gotten a great main event like this. But that's just me. This match was pure violence. That is exactly what it was. This match was pure violence on all levels. There was a shot where Hangman Page had a fork and he was stabbing it on the forehead of Jon Moxley. And we've seen that type of action before in AEW in matches like this. But the crazy thing about it, the crazy thing about that part where where Hangman was stabbing Jon Moxley with the fork, was that the camera actually panned toward the head of Jon Moxley, and you saw the blood gash out of the head of Jon Moxley. Crazy. There was barbed wire. There was a bunch of interference with Marina Shafir. There was a bunch of interference with more of the members of the Death Riders. There was a barbed wire board. There was everything. There was a barbed wire not barbed wire, but there was a board of nails, which was utilized to its full core. And there were times in this match that you could have easily looked away. But, dude, man, it was absolutely insane. But the more important thing about this is, remember how I talked about how this match felt like WrestleMania 40? Well, this was WrestleMania 40 on steroids. Will Osprey came out. He tried to help Hangman Page with the Death Riders because, of course, in the build-up to this match, Will Osprey wanted everybody to work together. Meanwhile, Swerve and Hangman just did not want to work together, given their history. And he comes in and essentially gets destroyed by Claudio Castagnoli and the rest of the Death Riders, and gets carried out. And more importantly, Swerve Strickland did not come out. But what happens? What happens after that? A masked man shows up, and it's Bryan Danielson. Bryan Danielson, my boy Bryan Danielson, returned and hit the Busaiku knee. Meanwhile, you had Darby Allin. You had a video package. You had a video of Darby Allin in Mount Everest, and you had Darby fall down from the rafters and just take everybody out. Take out the Death Riders. Take everybody out. Which was such an awesome moment. If there was any great position for Darby Allin to be involved when it comes to this match, it was this. So Darby Allin came down from the rafters, all that. Meanwhile, Bryan Danielson, when Bryan Danielson came in, he was doing the yes chants. And there was a recent report about WWE calling Bryan Danielson to tell him to stop doing the yes chants, which is insane, but it was hilarious. He did the yes chants anyway, and the entire crowd was with him for it. But they were working with the Death Riders. They were beating up the Death Riders going into the crowd. The Young Bucks come in out of nowhere, super kick Hangman Page. What happens after that? They were in control of the whole outcome, and it looked like Jon Moxley was going to get the win. Meanwhile, later on in the match, they were on the outside. Marina Shafir was again getting involved, like she usually does with Jon Moxley's matches. She was getting involved, and what happens? What happens after that? Jon Moxley tells Marina Shafir to grab the briefcase. She tells Jon Moxley to grab the briefcase, and she goes to the timekeeper's area and she grabs the briefcase. But meanwhile, what happens? Prince Nana immediately just handcuffs Marina Shafir, and she's unable to move. She can't move, and she has the briefcase. And what happens? Swerve Strickland takes out the Young Bucks on the other side. He takes out the Young Bucks. Swerve Strickland, Hangman Page's arch enemy, comes in and helps Hangman Page. And what happens? What happens? Swerve Strickland has the chain that Hangman Page used against Jon Moxley, the same chain that Swerve Strickland beat Hangman Page in that first Texas death match. That chain, he gives it to Hangman Page. And what happens? Hangman Page, Adam Page, wraps the chain around the neck of Jon Moxley. And what happens? For a little bit, Moxley was fighting it, and then he eventually escaped. But what happens? He ends up hitting the buckshot lariat, and Jon Moxley lands on the freaking nails. A brutal scene, I might add. A brutal, crazy scene. You guys got to watch this match, man. This match was intense. And what happens? Hangman Page goes to the apron, wraps the chain once again around Jon Moxley, the same way that he did in their first Texas Death Match 2 years ago at Revolution. Chokes out Jon Moxley. And people need to give Jon Moxley credit because, and I know a lot of people were saying this, but Jon Moxley was selling tremendously well in this match. Jon Moxley was selling fantastically. Jon Moxley was selling just the pain of having a chain being wrapped around your neck. And what happens? Jon Moxley, the same way that he lost against Hangman Page, the same thing happened in this match at All In. Jon Moxley taps out, and Hangman Page becomes the AEW World Champion. The reign of terror of Jon Moxley is over. The reign of terror of Jon Moxley is over. The Death Riders, even though I feel like they're still going to be a thing, Jon Moxley's reign as the AEW World Champion with the Death Riders are dead. And the pop that the crowd made when Hangman Page got the win was crazy. One of the loudest pops I've ever seen in any show. And what happens? He grabs the briefcase. Hangman Page grabs the briefcase. And, of course, the AEW World Championship has been stuck in a briefcase throughout the past 9 months. We did not see the belt on television. It's literally been stuck in a briefcase throughout the entirety of Jon Moxley's reign. He opens the case, grabs the World Championship, and the crowd popped for that. And Hangman Page holds up the World Championship high in victory. That was essentially the main event of last night's All In. What was the significance about this match? Yes, the Death Rider storyline has been deemed a failure. But the match last night, the main event of All In last night, yes, it was the culmination of the Death Rider storyline, but it felt like it was more than that. It felt like it was the culmination of not only the Death Rider storyline, it was the culmination of Hangman Page's story. Because again, when Hangman Page, he did win the World Championship before, but he wasn't necessarily the top guy. CM Punk was the top guy, not Hangman Page, even though Hangman Page was the World Champion. And ironically, CM Punk was the one that won the World Championship from Hangman Page. This moment is significant because it not only solidifies Hangman Page as the AEW World Champion, but it solidifies Hangman Page as the face of the company. It solidifies Hangman Page as the face of All Elite Wrestling. What did I say when we were talking about Jon Moxley versus Hangman Page earlier? What did I say? Hangman Page is AEW. Hangman Page's story is essentially the story of AEW. Literally the story of AEW. Hangman Page's story and AEW's story coincide with one another. And that's what makes this moment special. And that's what made people invested in Hangman Page to begin with. Hangman Page was the guy that first declared going after the AEW World Championship when that title didn't even exist. In that first press conference all the way back in 2019. Fast forward to 2021, he won the world title. Then he went on a downward spiral. And what's crazy is that some people may even create the argument that, you know, a lot of the stuff that happened with Hangman Page, he deserved. But with Hangman Page, man, seeing Hangman Page as a character just progress, just literally progress, is something that is just amazing. And the fact that Hangman Page won the world title, Jon Moxley actually lost. He actually lost, and the pop from the crowd was just insane. Everything about this match was perfect. There's not a bad thing that I can say at all about this match. Now, for all you grifters out there that are constantly like accusing AEW of quote unquote copying WWE, yes, this match is very similar to the WrestleMania 40 match. It's very similar, but it was AEW's spin on it. And I'm going to be honest, I enjoyed every minute of it. I love the involvement of Darby. I loved the involvement of Bryan Danielson. I loved the involvement of Swerve and Will Osprey. Everything about this match was fantastic. You know how everybody talks about AEW, quote unquote, not telling stories? Everybody always says that. AEW does not tell stories. And they always constantly point to AEW as the promotion where you just have wrestlers do flips and dives and they have no psychology and all that crap. That is not the case. AEW always told stories. Why do you think people gravitated towards the promotion when the promotion first launched in 2019? It's because they had brilliant storytelling. Before AEW was even a thing, the Elite, the Young Bucks, Cody Rhodes, Kenny Omega, Hangman Page, you know where they did the majority of their storytelling? Outside of the ring. Yeah, they did their storytelling in the ring. They had great moments in the ring and great stories in the ring. But they also did storylines outside of the ring. They did storytelling outside of the ring with their Being the Elite YouTube channel. AEW knows how to tell stories. One of the biggest problems with AEW throughout the past couple of years was the fact that they didn't know how to execute their storylines properly. That was not the case when it comes to this match. AEW executed the downfall of Jon Moxley and the downfall of the Death Riders very, very, very perfectly. Yes, you can say the Death Rider storyline was a waste of all of our time. But if you really think about it, also the Death Rider storyline was very simple. Jon Moxley wants to burn AEW to the ground. If you really think about it, Jon Moxley is essentially, I know I'm crazy for saying this, but Jon Moxley is essentially the babyface. Yes, Hangman Page, of course, he's the babyface, but what I'm saying when it comes to this storyline as a whole, Jon Moxley years ago was the ace of AEW. He's seen all of the, and I'm only talking about this from a storyline perspective. I'm not talking about this from a real life. I'm talking about this from a storyline perspective. Jon Moxley saw all of the drama that was going on in AEW and he was tired of it. Jon Moxley wanted to burn AEW to the ground and he was waiting for somebody to step up and take the belt from him. He physically put the belt in a briefcase because he wanted to be challenged. He wanted to be challenged by somebody who is going to step up to the plate, who is going to take this away from me, who is going to step up to the plate and put AEW in a much better place than it did before. That is brilliant storytelling. Brilliant storytelling. And say what you want about the Death Riders, and trust me, there's a lot of bad that you could say about the Death Riders. But on paper, dude, the storyline was brilliant. It was brilliant on paper. The problem was how AEW executed it. That was the problem. The group itself is not a bad group. Again, the problem with the Death Riders was the way that the Death Riders were executed on TV. There was nothing different about the Death Riders. They were just normal heels on the roster. Anybody could have done what Jon Moxley had done. But Jon Moxley can tell you with anything. Jon Moxley can tell you with anything. And honestly, we have to give Jon Moxley credit. I was listening to a podcast earlier. I was listening to Brian Alvarez on Wrestling Observer Live, and we got to give Jon Moxley credit. Jon Moxley was a fantastic heel. And bro, he sold so well in this match. He put over Hangman Page like $1 million. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah, Roman Reigns is one of the greatest of all time. Yeah, Seth Rollins is up there. But in my opinion, my favorite Shield member was always Jon Moxley / Dean Ambrose. Because, yeah, Roman, Seth knew how to tell stories. But Jon Moxley always knew how to give you that violent side. He always knew how to give you that really not really serious, but he always knew how to make a lot of people look good in the process. And he knew how to sell you on anything. I'm not saying that Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins didn't do that, because they did. I'm just saying, I feel like out of all three Shield members, Jon Moxley does the best at selling you a certain feud, selling you a fight, selling you a battle between two athletes, between two fighters, between two wrestlers. And that was the significance of this whole match. Everybody paid this pay-per-view to watch Jon Moxley versus Hangman Page. And now Hangman Page is the world champion. He's not only the world champion, but he's also the face of AEW. And that is the biggest story that I can tell you guys when it comes to this match. This match was pure perfection on all levels. Pure perfection. But yeah, that was All In. That was my whole, well over an hour review on All In. Overall, I really enjoyed the show for what it was. It was a phenomenal show. Everybody compares All In to WrestleMania. This is essentially AEW's WrestleMania. It is. It is essentially their WrestleMania. But I've always stated this, and I stated this when AEW did the first All In at Wembley Stadium. Technically, the first All In was the second ever All In, but the very first All In all the way back in 2018 was not an AEW production. But it's still, the first Wembley show was the second All In. But AEW's first All In show, and, they had Wembley last year and this year. I've always said this about All In. All In is not AEW's WrestleMania. All In was AEW's answer to WrestleMania. Just like how Starrcade was WCW's answer to WrestleMania. It's the same thing, but All In my opinion, is way bigger than Starrcade. All In was a fantastic show. All In was the culmination of a lot of things. And, of course, now AEW, just like in WWE, after WrestleMania, AEW is going to have a hard reset. Now we're starting fresh. Hangman is the world champion. Who is Hangman Page going to be feuding with? A lot of people are pointing towards MJF. And I know Hangman Page has had a lot of similarities with guys like Magnum TA. I feel like we're going to be getting, Hangman Page is like the modern day Magnum TA and MJF is like modern Ric Flair. I know that's a cliche, but it's very true. But, dude, we can get a full-fledged Hangman Page and MJF feud is something that I'm looking forward to. But if there's anything that I can say about All In is that AEW is in a much better place. Now, from a creative standpoint, are they perfect? No, they're not. But AEW, in my opinion, throughout this year, even though they still make some sort of mistakes left and right, AEW, to me, from a PR standpoint and from just a perception standpoint, people are starting to take AEW a little bit more seriously than they did throughout the last 2 years, which is great. And hopefully that momentum continues on, man. Hopefully that momentum continues on. But that was my review of AEW All In. All right, we're going to be continuing on with the WrestleHavoc podcast. I would love to thank all of you guys that are joining me on the WrestleHavoc YouTube channel, but also I want to thank you guys, whoever is joining me on the WNN Facebook page and YouTube channel, because, of course, you guys make a bulk of what makes this show special, so I really appreciate all you guys that are watching this show. Before we continue on with this show, please make sure to like and subscribe to the WrestleHavoc channel right here on YouTube, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and As the freaking referee would say, ring, ring, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Also, quick note, I will be going live once again later today, as I will be giving you guys my live reactions for tonight's WWE Evolution PLE. It should be a great show, but we're going to be previewing that show later on this show. But we're going to be moving on right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast, and we're going to be talking about Saturday night's main event. Saturday night's main event took place, and what's crazy is that the ending, or the main event of All In Texas, ironically, had, this is crazy, ironically happened right around the same time as Saturday night's main event was about to start. So we're going to do a quick rundown of the card. Of course, the big talking point when it comes to Saturday night's main event was Goldberg's last match, and ironically, it was actually a pretty good match. But there was some controversy when it came to this show, and of course that controversy involved Seth Rollins, but we will be talking about Seth Rollins later on as we go through Saturday night's main event. But we're going to do the quick results of Saturday night's main event. Drew McIntyre defeated Randy Orton. Of course, this was involving Jelly Roll. Jelly Roll was actually coming into the corner of Randy Orton. And I know a lot of people, when WWE first announced Jelly Roll to be a part of SmackDown, and there was a lot of rumors that he was going to be involved with SummerSlam, I know a lot of fans were upset about that. I don't know why those fans were upset about that, but it is what it is. But we had Drew McIntyre versus Randy Orton, of course, a returning Drew McIntyre a couple of weeks ago. Drew McIntyre defeated Randy Orton. And what happened after that was, of course, Jelly Roll got involved. First off, Randy Orton hit Drew McIntyre with the RKO. After that, of course, Jelly Roll got hit with the Claymore kick by Drew McIntyre. I believe Drew McIntyre was the one that went over. Was it Randy Orton? I completely forgot. But it is what it is. Randy Orton defeated Drew McIntyre. Hold on. No, it was Randy Orton beating. It was Randy Orton beating Randy Orton. I don't know why, because I'm reading the results off of here, and I remember vividly Randy Orton beating Drew McIntyre. I don't know why this report flat out wrote that Drew McIntyre defeated Randy Orton. Randy Orton beat Drew McIntyre, so my apologies, guys. But Randy Orton was the one that beat Drew McIntyre, and of course Drew McIntyre was arguing with Jelly Roll, and then of course what happened? Logan Paul ended up getting involved. Drew McIntyre got hit with the RKO. That is exactly what took place. I remember vividly. I don't know why this report is saying, or why the summary is saying Drew McIntyre defeated Randy Orton. But Randy Orton got the win. Jelly Roll got hit with the Claymore. And this sets up a match at SummerSlam with, of course, Drew McIntyre and Logan Paul taking on Randy Orton and Jelly Roll at SummerSlam. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. Solo Sikoa, of course, defeated Jimmy Uso for the WWE United States Championship. And, of course, Solo Sikoa is having a run with the U.S. title after beating Solo Sikoa. Dude, this is so funny. So I'm reading this from Forbes, and it was not Solo Sikoa. Like, they literally wrote this. Solo Sikoa defeated Jacob Fatu. He did not defeat Jacob Fatu. Well, he did, but not on this show. He wrestled Jimmy Uso. What are you talking about? So not only they had Drew McIntyre defeating Randy Orton, but they also had Solo Sikoa defeating Jacob Fatu. Jacob Fatu got involved later after the match, but Solo Sikoa got the win. And Solo Sikoa was wrestling Jimmy Uso. But, of course, Solo Sikoa is running roughshod with his new bloodline, which, honestly, I'm not really too keen on. Of course, they have Jeff Cobb or JC Mateo, and, of course, Hikuleo, what's his name? Talatonga. I'm not a fan of that name. It's like WWE's making up names, but they had that. Solo Sikoa won. They were beating up Jimmy Uso. Jacob Fatu ended up coming in for the save. We had LA Knight versus Seth Rollins, and LA Knight defeated Seth Rollins, but the match ended very abruptly because Seth Rollins suffered through an injury. If you guys don't know, during the match, Seth Rollins did a springboard. I think it was a springboard moonsault. And what happened was he landed on his feet, but he kind of twickled his ankle. and didn't really look good in the process. And from what it looks like, Seth Rollins is currently injured. We do not know the extent of his injury, but it's very concerning considering we not only had Adam Cole announce that he was going to be taking time off, we could very well be seeing a possibility in which Seth Rollins could be taking time off as well. And ironically, what's crazy is that a lot of people thought that this whole injury thing that they were playing on television was a work. And they thought that considering Seth Rollins is Mr. Money in the Bank, he was going to cash in later in the night and win the World Heavyweight Championship. Honestly, I don't think that WWE would work an injury angle. I don't think they'd be that dumb to do that, but a lot of fans were thinking that way. But from what it looks like, the injury is very real. So we not only had Adam Cole announce that he was going to be taking time off, and from what it looks like, it was based off of a concussion that he suffered, but we also have Seth Rollins, who suffered an injury. Again, we do not know the extent of Seth Rollins' injury, but a lot of people are concerned considering, of course, Seth Rollins is currently leading a stable with Paul Heyman, Braun Breaker, and Bronson Reed. But best wishes to Seth Rollins. We do not know the current extent of his injury, but we will update you guys whenever we would get the chance. Gunther versus Goldberg. Now, if there's one thing that I can complain about this whole Saturday night's main event, and I complained about this last night, the commercials. WWE, of course, is on NBC. WWE is on NBC. But the biggest problem with WWE being on NBC is the fact that there are just way too many commercials. I can remember on the last Saturday night's main event, WWE would come back from commercial break and not even 5 minutes. Like, they'd be like less than 3 minutes. They'd go back to commercial break once again. The commercial breaks did not stop on this show. They were nonstop from what I saw from a lot of fans. I actually ended up watching the show midway through because I was still watching All In. But from what I observed, there was a crap ton of commercials on this show. A ton. And I mean a ton of commercials on this show. And it was kind of embarrassing if you really think about it. It was kind of annoying. And another thing that was controversial with this show was considering the LA Knight and Seth Rollins match ended the way that it did, considering, of course, Seth Rollins suffered an injury. There was like 20 minutes left of the show. And it was still like, what was it like? It was 9:38 and the show ended at 10 o'clock, and the show has to end at 10 o'clock because NBC, of course, has the 10 o'clock news. And what's crazy is that everybody was like, how is Goldberg going to be wrestling a 20-minute or whatever minute match? Because Goldberg is not known to wrestle, 30-minute, 20-minute matches. He's just not known to wrestle those types of matches. He isn't. Goldberg is known to wrestle short matches. But yeah, it is what it is. But I mean, look, the Goldberg and Gunther match was great for what it was. It was not a bad match. WWE, of course, they had Goldberg make his entrance. The involvement of Gage was great as well. It was not a bad match. If anything, it was actually a pretty fun Goldberg match. Probably his best match in his fairly recent run in a while. I mean, in my opinion, before this match, the last best Goldberg match, in my opinion, was the Brock Lesnar match at WrestleMania 33, because that match single-handedly redeemed not only Goldberg, but redeemed Brock Lesnar from the debacle that was their match at WrestleMania 20 all the way back in 2004. But still, it was everything that you would expect. It was not, honestly, it was nothing really special. But, of course, you kind of knew that Goldberg was not going to go over in this match. And, of course, Goldberg hit the spear. And, it took time for Goldberg to get the pin, but Gunther kicked out. And then he ended up hitting the sleeper. And then he made Goldberg not tap out. He made Goldberg pass out. It's so weird, man. When you're talking about a match between two guys that their names are fairly similar, Gunther and Goldberg, it's fairly crazy. But still, Gunther made Goldberg pass out and retained his World Heavyweight title. And this was the craziest part. And I'm not even going to blame WWE with this. I mean, this is, in my opinion, an NBC issue. I may be totally wrong, but NBC are the ones paying WWE, and whatever happens. Goldberg was about to cut his speech, and he was literally just starting to cut his farewell speech right after the match. And not even that, before Goldberg was even cutting his speech, WWE went to commercial break right after Gunther got the win. Yeah. They went straight to commercial break right after Gunther got the win. Keep in mind, this was like 3 to 4 minutes before the show went off the air. So imagine this. They could have easily had Goldberg speak for maybe like 3 minutes. But WWE or NBC, I believe it was NBC, foolishly decided to cut to commercial break right after Gunther beat Goldberg, which was such a stupid move on NBC's end. It was a really dumb move on NBC's end. And we come back, and WWE, they have everybody there. They got the Cat Ernest Miller there. They got DDP. They got his son Gage. They got his wife. They got everybody. They got everybody there. Everybody was in the ring supporting Goldberg. Goldberg was about to give his farewell speech, which WWE thankfully uploaded it in full on their YouTube channel, but it would have been so much better if it was on NBC. Bro, not even like a minute of Goldberg when it came to his farewell speech, like into a minute. Like a minute passes by and WWE immediately cuts. WWE immediately cuts Goldberg's speech, and they go straight to whatever the next programming NBC has. Dude, talk about an embarrassment. This is not Goldberg's fault. I don't think this is WWE's fault. This is an NBC issue. One of the biggest problems with these Saturday Night's Main Events is the fact that WWE puts way too many commercials. I understand you have to put commercials on broadcast television. I understand that. But bro, the commercials, the amount of commercial breaks that were on this show were just overkill in my opinion. Flat out overkill, and it was absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous, in my opinion. It was really dumb, and to me, it was kind of disrespectful towards Goldberg. Say what you want about Goldberg, and I've said my fair share about Goldberg, but to me, that was utter disrespectful on NBC's end for them doing what they did, in my opinion. Like, it just felt so rushed, and it was just absolutely terrible. But, yeah, that was Saturday Night's Main Event. If you guys want to watch Goldberg's farewell speech, it was on WWE's YouTube channel, so go check it out. All right. Moving on, we're going to be talking real quick about TNA. Yes, TNA was actually in the news this week. If you guys don't know, TNA president Carlos Silva was actually on the Ariel Helwani show. He was on the Ariel Helwani show, and he actually had a really good interview. I actually urge you guys, if you guys don't know who the president of TNA Wrestling is, if you don't know who Carlos Silva is, I urge you guys to check out the interview that he did with Ariel Helwani on the Ariel Helwani show. It used to be the MMA Hour, but it's now the Ariel Helwani show. And he talked about TNA and what he did before TNA. Of course, he worked with Anthem. I believe he was the president for, at the time, which is now the PFL, but he worked at the time with the World Series of Fighting, which is now the PFL. But yeah, I believe he was the president of that. I believe also he was I think he's still the current president of Invicta FC, which is the all-female MMA league, which is also owned by Anthem. But this interview actually made waves because Carlos Silva, one of the big talking points with this interview with Ariel Helwani was him talking about TNA and their media rights, because everybody is talking about TNA Wrestling right now, man. TNA, of course, they're going to be having their Slammiversary show this Saturday at the UBS Arena. And a lot of people are wanting TNA to get a national television deal here in the U.S. on a major television platform. And according to Carlos Silva, TNA Wrestling is in a 60 to 90-day window to get this media rights deal done. This was the quote that Carlos Silva stated on the Ariel Helwani show. I stated this, and I quote. He stated this, and I quote, "Along with our partners at Access, Len, Andy, who runs Access TV, we want to find a bigger platform. We have CAA helping us. We're actively in the middle. If I can get a few things done, I'd love to tell you about the deals. We're close. We've been working on it since the beginning of the year, since I really joined. It really has accelerated over the last 60 days. We're working through it," he said. He was then asked about how close an announcement could be. Silva replied, I think we could be in the 60 to 90 day window to get something done. As you know, the media landscape is changing every single day, and literally week to week, things are changing. We just saw some other networks that are going to get sold again this week that are changing hands. You never know. It's never done until there is a dotted line and dotted and T's are crossed. We're working hard at it. Silva noted that the deal would come into play at the end of 2025, and that makes sense because normally when it comes to television networks, they always tend to have new programming in the fall going into the winter. He was asked if TNA would be going live each week, and Silva replied, and I quote, "We've been asked by many partners that they'd like to have it be live 52 weeks a year, so we're talking through how we would do that. Maybe it wouldn't go live in January straight away, 52 weeks, but we would certainly lean into that and try to make it happen." Which is a game changer for TNA. If they have this new television deal and they are going live 52 weeks a year, that is great for TNA. Of course, TNA has done live episodes before throughout the majority of this year. Not the majority of this year, but like every few months they would do a live Impact. Finally, Carlos Silva was asked if the show would remain on Thursdays. He stated this, and I quote, "Could be up for grabs. You'd have to look at the crowded landscape, and trust me, if you, as somebody who watches wrestling every day, dude, there's literally like wrestling, and that is not even including the pay-per-views. There's literally wrestling every week. Monday you have Raw. Tuesday you have NXT. Wednesday you have AEW Dynamite. Thursday you have TNA Impact if you watch TNA Impact. Friday you have SmackDown, and Saturday if you watch Collision, there is Collision. Or Saturday, there is a WWE PLE, or a WWE PLE could easily be on a Sunday. So there is a lot of content. I think it's best for TNA to remain on Thursdays. But he stated it could be up for grabs. You have to look at the crowded landscape of wrestling. You don't want to go, he says Collision, but it's unclear if he's referencing head-to-head with another show or AEW Collision. You don't want to start playing that game. Thursday has worked out well so far, he said. While making the media rounds, Silva and TNA Wrestling is looking for $10 million per year on a media rights deal. And honestly, $10 million, if you compare it to like WWE and AEW, sounds really small. I mean, WWE is making billions of dollars just on their television rights. AEW, I mean, their deal is for like, what is it, like 3 to 4 years? Dude, they're like that deal. They're making well over $100 million just on their television deal alone. And AEW is making really good money. For TNA Wrestling, $10 million per year, that may seem like a small amount, but if you really think about it, TNA Wrestling, you know, they don't have a big budget, and $10 million per year is actually a good thing for a company like TNA. Elsewhere during the interview, Silva explained the decision to fire Gail Kim, and he went in depth about how things change and all that stuff. I don't know the extent about the whole Gail Kim situation, but primarily we're going to be talking about the whole television deal thing. Overall, what are my thoughts on Carlos Silva talking about TNA and his interview overall on the Ariel Helwani show? I actually got the chance to actually watch the interview that Carlos Silva did on the Ariel Helwani show, and shout out to Ariel Helwani. Ariel Helwani is fantastic. Yeah, I know some people tend to say he loves instigating problems, but whatever, man. Ariel Helwani is one of the best journalists in the entire combat sports space, because he's not afraid to ask the tough questions. And if you are a journalist, you have to ask the hard questions. You can't just suck up to people and be biased all over the place. You have to ask the tough questions. And that is what Ariel Helwani tends to do all the time. And I applaud Ariel Helwani for that. But when it comes to this whole interview, man, Carlos Silva, he has been making waves. We didn't necessarily knew what he was all about. From what it looks like, he's not really that big of a big wrestling guy, but from what it looks like, man, he's definitely like, you know, learning the ways, and he's really making some big moves. I've said this before and I'll say it again. TNA, if they want to grow, they need to be on a major television platform. The only reason as to why TNA is on Access TV is because of the fact that their parent company, that being Anthem Sports and Entertainment, purchased that network just for Impact to be put on the air. That is the only reason why. If you really think about it, Access TV is not necessarily a sports network. Access TV is more of a music channel, if you really think about it. Primarily like country music, all that type of stuff. Access TV it has a lot to do with like pop culture and music. Wrestling doesn't really fit the mold of Access TV. Now, I will say this. even though TNA is going to have most likely a major television distributor, which is great for TNA, because think about this. TNA 10 years ago was in a horrible financial state. Now, granted, it was not because of the current owners. It was from the original regime, that being Dixie Carter. She did not know how to run her organization smoothly. She was she could be the nicest person in the world, but she was a terrible, 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 terrible promoter. Terrible promoter. She led TNA into a horrible financial state. It got so bad to the point where they got booted out off of Spike. Then they went to Destination America. They got booted off of that. Like they jumped from network to network to network to the point, it got so bad to the point where they had issues with Billy Corgan because, you know, they got a loan for Billy Corgan. They were unable to pay Billy Corgan. And then they ran into issues of not being able to pay talent. Like it was really bad for them. And then, of course, Anthem bought the company and the rest is history. But TNA, man, is the type of promotion that just doesn't die. Bro, TNA, man, the fact that they are still around is crazy and shocking to me, but at the same time, I'm actually happy about that. Because think about this. Even though TNA is in a partnership with WWE, and even though they are going to get most likely a national television distributor here in the United States, they are not going to beat AEW as the number 2 entity in the United States. I'm sorry. AEW has an unlimited budget, and they have way more resources than TNA. Oh, but TNA has the partnership with WWE. Yeah, you're right. They do. But it can only get you so far. TNA alone as an organization, Anthem is not willing to put up the amount of dollars it is to compete with an AEW or WWE. And they're not necessarily competing with WWE considering they are in a partnership with WWE. And I'm glad that WWE is actually helping them actively try to get a television deal. But I will say this. TNA getting a national television distribution deal, most likely, is great for the industry. Because we are probably right now on the verge of entering the era of the big three once again. What do I mean when I say the big three? Well, in the late 90s, you had the WWF, WCW, and both of those promotions were competing against each other. But you also had a third promotion, and that third promotion was ECW. And there was a time where ECW was on national television, that being TNN. Now, granted, TNN was, even though it should have been looked upon as ECW finally being on television, it was actually a nightmare for ECW because it actually led to ECW's downfall. But when ECW first went on TNN, which later became Spike TV, we had 3 major promotions on national television. We are about to enter the age where WWE has multiple distribution deals with multiple major networks and streaming services. AEW has a major deal with Warner Brothers Discovery, which, by the way, has one of the largest streaming services in the world in HBO Max. And they have their show on there. And TNA is probably on the verge of signing a distribution deal with any major television distributor. We do not know what network that is. Some people are saying Paramount. Some people are saying Amazon. We do not know. But it's going to be vastly bigger than Access TV. This is great news for TNA. Great news for TNA. Because it's great for the wrestlers because the wrestlers are now able to have a third place where they can showcase their craft on a national level. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is actually a good thing for the industry. It shows how healthy the industry is. So hats off to TNA. We'll probably have more information in the next couple of weeks, but yeah, those are my thoughts on TNA. In our final story, not really a story, but we're going to be doing a quick rundown of the WWE Evolution card, which is actually going to be taking place in an hour. But before we actually get into that, we have some news. Some of the news is NXT Heatwave. NXT Heatwave is set to air on the same day as AEW's Forbidden Door. According to WrestleVotes, WWE has scheduled NXT's annual Heatwave Premium live event to run in South Carolina on the same day as AEW and New Japan's Forbidden Door event, which is going to be taking place in London at the O2 Arena. WrestleVotes actually, WrestleVotes put this out on WrestleVotes Radio. They stated this, and I quote, WWE and TKO want to continue holding shows on the same days that AEW are holding shows so that they can control the talk and momentum online. Wow, really? Wow, really? They stated this, and I quote, this is definitely something WWE wants to do where, hey, if NXT is on the road and booking for arenas, they want to do it somewhere, and they're going to have the last word of the night. AEW is going to be having All In the afternoon, and WWE is going to be coming in there after with Saturday night's main event. So at the end of the day, you're not just talking about the fallout from AEW, you're talking about what WWE is doing as well. Controlling the narrative and momentum online. So there's no coincidence. There is definitely a directive coming from WWE with the behest of TKO behind, and they're all for it. They want to do more of these things. This is not surprising. WWE, of course, the only reason as to why they had 3 events this weekend, of course, they had NXT Great American Bash, they had Saturday night's main event, and they had Evolution, is because of the fact that AEW had All In. That is the only reason as to why they had that show take place. Those shows take place. And honestly, it's kind of petty on WWE, and honestly, it kind of looks like WWE's desperate. And I say that because we're still at a time where WWE is relatively hot. They're still relatively hot, and the product has never been hotter. I mean, look, I know some people will be like, oh, but you treated AEW as competition. Well, this is what competition looks like, and you're right. You're right. But at the same time, these are the same people that flat out talk negatively about AEW and constantly say that they are not competition when WWE's action shows that they are competition. It's kind of hilarious if you really want to think about it. But if there's one thing that I can say about AEW's response, especially Tony Khan's response, is that Tony Khan has really improved his PR game. If there's anything that AEW or Tony Khan really had a problem with, was his PR. Tony Khan would tend to go ballistic on social media whenever WWE would go head to head with AEW or vice versa, and he would put out jokingly some hilarious tweets, ultimately getting cooked in the process. But I will say, Tony Khan has really taken it professionally, and he realized that the best way to combat WWE and their counter programming is to just put on the best product that you could possibly put out. That's the only way. Literally, that is the only way to put out, to respond to WWE, putting out the best product that you could possibly put out. And AEW is doing that. We saw that with All In last night. But it's no secret, WWE is going to be continuing to counter-program AEW. All right, moving on. Our final story, we're finally going to be talking about Evolution. We're going to be doing a quick card rundown of Evolution. We got the no-holds-barred match with the special guest referee, Bianca Belair, which was announced last night at Saturday night's main event between Jade Cargill and Naomi. We got the NXT Women's title match as Jacy Jayne takes on Jordynne Grace. We got the Battle Royal for the Women's Championship match at Clash in Paris, which clearly there's going to be a lot of legends there. We got the Women's Tag Team Fatal 4-Way match as Raquel Rodriguez and Roxanne Perez take on the Kabuki Warriors and Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair and Sol Ruca and Zarya. We got the Women's Intercontinental title match, which is actually a match that I'm actually very excited for. Becky Lynch versus Bayley versus Lyra Valkyria. We got the Women's Championship match as Tiffany Stratton defends her title against Trish Stratus. And in the main event, we got the Women's World title on the line as Io Sky defends her title against Trish Stratus. So yeah, that is the card for tonight's Evolution PLE. I'm going to be going live and giving my live reactions for WWE Evolution, so be on the lookout if you guys are watching on the WrestleHavoc channel. But yeah, that is going to be concluding today's edition of the WrestleHavoc Podcast. We went early. We came on the air earlier today because, of course, we have Evolution. I have another live stream that I got to be doing. Yes, WWE flooded the gates with content, so I had to do this podcast early. But yeah, man, we definitely talked about a lot of the things pro wrestling, primarily All In. All In was a fantastic show, to say the least. It was arguably AEW's best show to date. But yeah, that was the WrestleHavoc Podcast from July 13th, 2025. Thank you guys so much if you guys are watching on the WNN Facebook page or YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much if you guys are watching on the WN app. And thank you guys so much if you guys are watching live on the WrestleHavoc channel. And as always, please like, subscribe, comment down below, push that bell for notifications. Look out for more videos right here on the WrestleHavoc channel in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And as the freaking referee would say, ring, ring, ring that damn bell for more notifications. And as always, it is yours truly, Flamin' Ricky DeRays, signing out. I'll see you guys all in the next video. Peace.